Hello, I'm Terrence McNally, and welcome to another newly recorded episode of Freeform, A World That Just Might Work. I'm going to be speaking today with Tiffany Shlain, Emmy-nominated filmmaker, founder of the Webby Awards, and author of 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week. And you can learn more at TiffanyShlain.com. That's Tiffany, Tiffany, Shlain, Shlain, one word, TiffanyShlain.com. Just to set up the program, after a 3-year hiatus since Trump's Electoral College victory, I've been doing a new interview every other week. Paul Hawken on climate change, Naomi Klein on her book No Is Not Enough, Arlie Hochschild on her book Strangers in Their Own Land and the Stories That Divide Us, Robert Wright on why he's a Buddhist. The show airs as specials on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA and streams weekly on the Progressive Voices Network on TuneIn. And podcasts are available anytime, anywhere on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever you call it, Podomatic.com, Google Play, etc., and at my site, terrencemcnally.net, TERRENCEMCNALLY.net. Now a quick plug for participation. Here's 5 organizations, 6 actually, that can help you if during this wayward administration you are working to make society the healthy and just place that we all need and deserve. The biggest organization probably working politically on this is Indivisible.us. Indivisible.us. They have local organizations all over the country, and you get a weekly email telling you what's timely and relevant for action politically. 2 organizations that are digital but work hand in hand with grassroots on the national level is moveon.org, moveon.org. And in the state of California, couragecampaign.org, couragecampaign.org. 2 very specific ones for how to deal with your representatives is 5calls.org. That's the number 5 and the word calls. And that tells you what are the most timely, relevant calls you might make to your representatives about legislation, etc. And then Town Hall Project, one word, townhallproject.com. And that one tells you when your representatives are going to be in the local area holding public meetings where you can meet them face to face. And then because climate change is such a big issue and because there is a general strike planned for late September, 350.org, 350.org, global organizing in our confrontation with climate change. Now to today's guest. Tiffany Shlain writes, quote, "We are living in the results of everyone being distracted, available 24/7, and the problem that this has created for our society, our children, our communities, our democracy, and ourselves are only growing." Well, you get no argument here. But along with her husband and 2 daughters, she's found a personal coping mechanism that is at the same time simple, radical, and traditional. And it's what they call a technology Shabbat, turning off all screens for 24 hours each week. 24 waking hours. In her... It's easy to do 24 hours in a week. In her first book, 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week, Shlain shares her story, offers lessons she's learned, and provides a blueprint for how to do it yourself and how to get your partner, your friends, your children, your boss on board with you. Along the way, she delves into the neuroscience, philosophy, psychology, and history of a weekly day of rest, long before the distractions were technology. A weekly day of rest, the Sabbath, across cultures, making the case for why we need to bring this ritual back. Honored by Newsweek as one of the women shaping the 21st century, Tiffany Shlain is an Emmy-nominated filmmaker and the founder of the Webby Awards, the kind of Oscars of the web. NPR named her UC Berkeley address as one of its best commencement speeches. And as I said, her first book, 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week, is just out. And you can learn more at TiffanyShlain.com. And you can follow her on Twitter at Tiffany Shlain. Welcome again, Tiffany Shlain, to Freeform, a world that just might work. And let me tell people that we're recording this interview Wednesday, August 14th.
Great to be back. I mean, I think the last time we had a deep dive was when my feature documentary Connected was out, which was a long time ago.
It was.
Like 8 years ago.
Yes.
So, 8 years ago. So it's nice to reconnect with new things to talk about.
That's right. It was actually, I looked it up and looked at that interview. It was September 2011, so almost exactly 8 years ago. And it's crazy because it certainly doesn't seem that long. And I've certainly been, watching what you've been working on and stay in touch with you through your quarterly breakfast at Tiffany's, and then in all the other stuff that you're doing. So, as you may remember from the last time, I like listeners to get a feel for the people behind the work and the ideas we talk about. So, I'd like you to first introduce them to you, talking about your path to the work you find yourself doing today, and so that they can get a sense of you. Feel free to go way back. Mentors, turning points, moments of decision, that sort of thing.
Let's go way back to the Apple IIe in the early 80s. I was super into computers, and when the first Mac came out in 1984, I just was fascinated with the potential because I had a modem, which I don't know if everyone can just dial back and remember before the web when all you could have was a dial-up modem and all you could connect to was the library at best. And from that, another high school student and I in the 80s wrote this very simple proposal called Uniting Nations in Telecommunications and Software. And the concept was that personal computers with the modem could connect students all over the world for world peace. And basically, to have global conversations about things that we share in common. And from that, I was invited to the Soviet Union as a student ambassador to talk about the power of personal computers. I find that incredibly ironic now that I went to Russia to talk about computers connecting us in light of the election hacking.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then I went to UC Berkeley. I was supposed to be a doctor. I was given the book The Making of a Woman Surgeon on many occasions by my surgeon father, Leonard Shlain, but I wanted to become a filmmaker, and the way I would pay for my documentaries is working in technology, because I always was into technology. And I was going back and forth from film and CD-ROMs, if people can remember the CD-ROM industry. And I was working on a CD-ROM about Sting, and someone said to me, "You have to see this thing called the web. There's people all over the world on a thing called a website, and they're all talking about how much they love Sting's music." And I was like, that's what I was hoping for in high school. And then shortly after that, I created the Webby Awards in the early days of the web and had great hopes for this decentralized network to connect people. And, ran the Webby Awards for almost a decade and then wanted to go back to filmmaking combined with the power of the web. So I started a film studio in San Francisco. I've had a lot of films at Sundance and really experimented a lot with using film plus the web to have global conversations about issues like gender equality and the neuroscience and social science of character development, and have made a lot of films about technology and science. So you could say that I've really been focused on this issue of technology. What does it mean to be human? When does technology amplify us, and when does it amputate us? And definitely lately, I've been increasingly concerned about how we're using the smartphones, how corporations are using us to use the smartphones, and how elections are being manipulated, and how distracted we all are. So I think that's like the 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
And, 10 years ago, I had two kind of very dramatic events happen within weeks of each other, which is my father died and my husband and I had a daughter, and it really shook me awake. Like, what are we doing on screens? We only have a short time on this earth. What are we doing here? Why are we just staring at these screens when there's someone we love right in front of us? So my husband, Ken Goldberg, and I, and at that point we had two daughters, we started turning off all screens one day a week for what we call our technology Shabbats. And what really started it is I'm part of this group that did a National Day of Unplugging called Reboot, and it was kind of a ceremonial one day a year event, but we did it that first year, and it felt so good. We never stopped doing it. So it's been almost 10 years now, and it's really changed our lives. And obviously I love technology, but I love being off technology. And I walk around now and everyone's just staring at their screens and being distracted. And when you're this distracted, it's really hard to do big picture thinking. So I do think it's the reason why we have our president right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, no argument there. Let's see. I want to fill in a few blanks there. Let's talk just a bit more about the Webbies. How did they start, and what was your hope? And do you think they have or do make a difference?
So the Webbies, that was when the web, if you can just try to remember, like no one knew what the web was. And a lot of people it was like this alternative medium, and it was only us nerds that were using the web at the time. So I was trying to create a framework that was accessible and understandable, like an award show, and kind of organize it. So we had categories like art and sports and film and science, and we had a weird category. Back then it was a lot of weird stuff on the web. And I think it gave a framework, and we started an International Academy of Digital Arts and Sciences with all these different luminaries from fields to kind of help judge and honor this young medium and say, this is the standard of excellence, and, push and inspire people to go beyond that each year. So I felt like in those early years, we were really kind of honoring the pioneers and pushing it further to be better. And my hope, which I think all the early web people, is that it was this amazing decentralized tool that was going to connect us in all these new ways and allow us to create. And of course, it has done so much of that. But what I think I never expected was everyone would be just staring at screens all the time and not being present in the real world. And I also, the moment that the web became very centralized, so that's, Facebook, and when corporations started selling the data and really using that as their business model, the advertising model. And so when the web went from decentralized to centralized, I think that's when things really shifted, and people are being manipulated beyond what they understand. And the great documentary that just came out on Netflix last month called The Great Hack, which I highly recommend. And it really shows how, with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, how manipulated our election was and how much our data sets are in the black market being sold. And it really shows all these elections around the world and how they're being affected. So there's both on a personal level, I think we're distracted and on the screens too much. And then there's on a kind of family level, then there's on a school level, a community level, and then a democracy level. And I have this simple practice that we've been doing that I feel like has brought such balance back into our lives. And it gives me the space to reflect and recalibrate each week how I'm using my tech. So it has this built-in quality where once a week, Friday night, we're Jewish, but I'm not a religious person. We're not religious. So we're not doing it for religious reasons. And to be honest, I kind of only thought, I didn't grow up doing Shabbat. My husband did, but I really felt like doing a full day of Shabbat, which is what the traditional Orthodox Jews or really observant Jews, a whole day of no work. And they read Torah and they rest. And in my mind, because I wasn't going to do that, it didn't feel available to me. Mm-hmm. But I think at the heart of what the Sabbath and Shabbat are about is about being present and doing a whole day something different. And so we do kick it off with a Friday night Shabbat meal with family and friends, and all the screens go off at that point, and then they're off for 24 hours. And it is like this, our favorite day of the week, and it's amazing. I mean, I do such different kinds of thinking on that day. And I think it's a different kind of thinking that we've really lost, where, so often now when I read anything I read in the book prompts me to think of something I want to go on the smartphone for, and then I'm down the rabbit hole and I'm off to the races. I'm never back. And on this one day a week, I think very deeply. I journal. I'm hanging out with my family. I laugh a lot more. I sleep a lot better. It's like, wow, this is available to me and everyone. And it's so easy and free and radical, and just do it. It's so life-changing. And again, when we started doing it, I didn't know how long we were going to do it. And I didn't imagine how crazy everyone would continue to get with the screen. So it felt like these two lines, like the longer we've done it, the more profound it's become. And the longer we've done it, the more everyone's got their head down everywhere.
Yeah, no, when I interviewed you in September 2011 on Connected, you were already doing it.
Right, so that's why it's so interesting. So that's when we had started doing it, way back then.
Yeah, in other words, if people even remembered how different the problem looked 10 years ago.
Totally.
The whole thing of, I was going to say that when the first line when I interviewed 10 years ago was, is the internet and our 24/7 culture, notice 24/7 was in the first line, now 24/6 is in the first line, but in our 24/7 culture of connection to and through screens, our doom or our deliverance, set it up, doom or deliverance.
That's a great opening line.
and if one looks at the 10 years in between, I think that doom or deliverance question has really been amplified hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and I think that's important is that, listen, technology is an extension of us. That's the Marshall McLuhan, philosophy. It is us. It is an extension of us, and we are good, bad, and everything in between. But I think people don't feel empowered because they're not thinking of it that way. They think it's this, oh, I'm addicted to this thing. But people should feel agency and empowered that they can rise up and control how they use it, or else it's going to be using you.
Yeah.
And that's the way, I think that's what we've gotten to, is people are being manipulated and addicted. I mean, it's like 1,000 engineers focused on addicting you. How can you compete with that? But
well,
you can, I believe in humans.
I know.
Humans
I know. And it's what when I think you found it as a refuge years ago, you found it this experience that was meaningful and tweaked the way you approached everything, and yet there's a book out now. What's being referred now is surveillance capitalism.
Oh, it's so good. I'm in the middle of it.
Oh, okay. There you go.
It's amazing. It's a thick book. I think it's like 600 pages. I think the way it feels. It's so good, though. She's brilliant, and it's all about what we're talking about. Yeah.
Right. And I interviewed T-Bone Burnett recently
Great.
about his keynote at the South by Southwest. And his keynote, if you weren't there and you haven't seen it,
I didn't hear it.
Okay,
yeah.
It's worth looking up because both the transcript and the audio is online, and it's really, really powerful. And it's about this problem about surveillance capitalism, which is where I first heard of the book. But what I'm saying is that when you first began doing the Shabbat, no one had figured out yet that business model, I don't think. And so
right.
it was kind of when you were saying, we need to have agency, we need to be able to know it's ours to turn off and on and use that was more, in a way, more true then. It's still true,
yeah.
But now, as you say, the some of the smartest young minds in the world are working to addict you.
Right.
and to sell your information and so on. Let me just read a couple of quotes from T-Bone's.
I can't wait to listen to his keynote.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. It is clear that what was begun as a mission, and this sounds so like our conversation 8 years ago. It is clear that what was begun as a mission to connect and unite mankind has mutated into a pernicious distortion machine that has disconnected mankind and put us at each other's throats, and in doing so has destroyed and is destroying institutions and knowledge that have taken centuries to develop. We've entrusted them with our most intimate data, and they are not worthy of that trust. They have betrayed our trust by engineering their platforms to be addictive and by making enormous fortunes surreptitiously selling those data that we have unknowingly handed over to them for free. And he goes on then to say that Facebook is worth somewhere around $475 billion, Google around $785 billion, so about $1.25 trillion, and their product, besides all of their technological genius, is our data.
Yes. Product is us. Yes.
So we're not Pollyanna here, but
well, and I'm also not completely. And I mean, I have a whole chapter in the book on social media because, right, if you just listen to what T-Bone just said, you wouldn't be on anything, right? Why would you be on anything? But here's the rub: is that there's so many of these tools that are also ways to disseminate those ideas.
Exactly.
From surveillance capitalism, and if you have a book or if you have a film, so it has connected. It has connected, over half the world, and that's real. So how do we wrestle with this issue and say what is making humanity better, what's making it worse, and what do we need to do about it? And in the book, I do big picture on how profound the day of rest when it was first introduced thousands of years ago. I kind of go into the labor movement, time on and time off, and how we are now on 24/7 and what are the implications of that. But towards the end of the book, I go into what I think needs to happen. And also, I'm making my film studio, we do this global day called Character Day, which looks at one's character development, the neuroscience and social science of developing who you are. And this year, the whole focus is going to be your character and screen use. When does being on screens enhance who you are, and when does it diminish it, and when should you turn them off? Because through all the research, so many character strengths, empathy and creativity and curiosity, all these things get turned on when you turn off that screen. And I think we've felt like we're living completely on the screen now, and we've forgotten how much comes from daydreaming and how much comes from like deep thinking and not having so much input at every second and processing what's already in your mind. So for Character Day this year, which I encourage all your listeners to sign up, it's free, and we had over 200,000 groups last year, and we provide films and resources, and we'll be discussing this deeply. And this year we're making 6 short films, and one of them is Dear CEO. It's like 1 minute long. One's Dear Legislature, 1 minute long, Dear Parent, Dear Youth, Dear Fellow Human. And they're all addressing everything we just talked about in these very directed ways of what's the problem, what's something you can do. Because it's real. And I think like when people find out about the book, it's almost like, obviously I think it is top of mind. I'm on the screens too much. My kids are on the screen. My partner's on the screens too much. I think everyone's thinking about it, and everyone's worried about our country, or everyone in my world and probably your world. But, okay, what do? We created this tool. We had great hopes for it. There's so many beautiful parts to it. And how do we rise up and say yes? And there are so many parts that are not healthy, that are a detriment to our society, to our relationships. And what are we going to do? There's a multi-pronged approach of what we need to do, but one that everyone can do this week, and it'll already start feeling better, and you'll already get more big picture thinking time, is to turning off the screens for a full day. I mean, I know a lot of people say, oh, I did it on my vacation, it felt so great, or now I'm doing it before I go to bed. Great. Those are all great, but I promise that building in a ritual of one day every week will feel, I can't even describe to you how much it brings clarity on what's important, on the little things and also on the big things, and more clarity on, I think, what we need to do. Because we don't have the space to, we're bombarded with stressful headlines and tweets and notifications, and it's like designed to keep you just like buzzing around where you can't have a complete thought.
Yeah. It's interesting. You made the point that technology is extensions. We tend to talk about technology as separate from us. And McLuhan, as you point out, said technology offers extensions of us and our abilities. We also tend to talk about nature as separate from us, when, of course, we are part of nature. So there's obviously, to me, a foundational understanding of that we are our technology in a way, and we are nature, and that there's the separation is what makes us feel alone, powerless, et cetera, et cetera. Yuval Noah Harari, the author of *Sapiens* and 24 Lessons for the 21st Century, et cetera, believes that the 3 greatest threats to society and the planet are nuclear weapons, climate change, and technological disruption, and that all 3 this is what's interesting to me. All three demand cooperation on a global scale to confront, and yet politically, we're in a moment where cooperation is under attack. That is to say, alliances are under attack. Trusting the other is under attack. All of that sort of thing. And so I think this is what we are dealing with right now. Is we have to the thing that separates us from our machines. And now I just said they're extensions of us. But what separates us from them is our human ability to cooperate, our human ability to socialize, and all of that sort of thing. And that at this moment, we need that more than ever. And yet, one other thing I wanted to reflect on was you mentioned, I believe, Sherry Turkle. When I interviewed her on Alone Together, and I asked her, she is like you, but for a longer period because she's a little bit older, has been, looking at the relationship of technology and society. And I said, well, what surprised you, right? And it's interesting. She said that I knew when I wrote like book number 2 about all this, Alone Together was book number 3, that some people were spending too much time in front of their screens playing video games. Some people were spending too much time in front of their screens. She says, what I hadn't anticipated was that the screen would become 24/7, that once it got on the phones, that was if you will, a quantum leap, a state shift from having to choose to sit down in front of your computer versus having that screen with you at all times. And I think, and that's sort of what I was saying.
That was 2007. I mean,
right. 8 years
about that in the book. I love Sherry's work, and yes, and that was the moment. I mean, it was the moment you could take it with you. I mean, people, the profound nature of the smartphone combining. I mean, do you remember the Pilot and the stylus? It used to be you had your calendar and your phone.
Yeah.
Or your contacts, your calendar, and your phone. That was it. The minute the iPhone came out and you brought the web with you, you could have that hit of distraction or entertainment at any moment. I mean, that's when everything changed. And that, so our older daughter, who's now 16, when she was graduating from 5th grade 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, every parent was getting their kid a smartphone for 5th grade graduation, except us.
Uh-huh.
I think there's one or two other families where we're like, no. She can get a flip phone, and I'm not even sure if she needs that. And anyways, we were such outliers. Like, why get a supercomputer for this 5th grader? Like, why? She's got a laptop at home. Why does she need that? And again, we were outliers. Everyone's like, oh, she's going to be left out of the fabric of the social and all this stuff. I think it was the best decision we ever made. She had a flip phone up until freshman year in high school and doing just fine, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then our younger daughter, there is a sea change, and it's hopeful because about 2 years ago, I heard there was a woman in Austin, a mother who started an initiative called Wait Until 8th, which is like wait till 8th grade. And I'm like, who is this woman? I called her. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, I'm getting down to I'm signing it. And then it got introduced to our school. I'm on the advisory board now. And like any parent, they're like, what? You can sign a pledge with other parents? And it's like sweeping the country. And it's called waittill8.org. There's all these great resources. But I think parents, because all the research is coming out, and they're just seeing it with maybe their older kids or, why should, that moment that Sherry, that we're talking about of the smartphone, do we really think a young developing mind who is at the most malleable point of neuroscience? I mean, it's like birth to 5 years is an extreme, huge growth. And then this other period where we're talking about, 5th grade onward, do they need a supercomputer when it's driven to addict? So that is a hopeful signal I can just point out is tons of parents are signing this all over the country. And I think it's because they saw, wait, I'm addicted. Mm-hmm. Why do I want to addict my kid so early?
Yeah.
Anyways, but I didn't mean to interrupt. You were talking about Sherry Turkle, who I love her work.
Yeah.
And
I was just saying
and,
that when you began, although the smartphone existed when you began the Technology Shabbat, It was still, I don't think at that point, that thing that everyone was kind of on all the time.
It was still gauche. It was still gauche to pull out your phone.
That's right.
Now I look around. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it was gauche to pull it out on a table. Now it's like everyone's got it at the table. Actually, at my film studio, we have a new rule. After I did this book and I read all the research that it takes 23 minutes to regain your flow when you've been interrupted. And just seeing someone else's smartphone off on the table will distract you. All cell phones are now in bags, zipped up. You check them on your breaks because it just creates an environment of distraction. Just looking at someone else's turned off smartphone, you're not going to be as focused.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
Okay,
let me, I want to talk, about my own situation, because I think it's, why not? I've got someone who's been, who's been deep into this for years.
I'm gonna put my Lucy
right.
5 cents
Lucy
sign
5
right
cents
now.
hat. Yep. Okay, so I visited an old friend recently, and just as I was leaving for the airport, so it wasn't a conversation we fleshed out, but both of us shared that we were both concerned about a couple of things, that we worry about what we hadn't really talked about much. And so it's not just me. Okay. First, too much time disappearing in front of our computer screens. Okay. Hours pass. I say I'm just going to look up something for research. I'm just going to check the weather. I'm just going to check the directions. I'm just going to check the traffic. And then I get caught and I lose track of time. Now, the other one that's related is that I don't hold down a full-time job, and I'm not bringing up kids right now, okay? And yet, it is very common at the end of the day for me to feel that I failed to accomplish enough and that I'm somehow further behind. I'm not sure what I'm behind, but it's that feeling that...
That's a great way to frame it.
You know?
Because we're losing a lot of time. I think that's real, the quality of time when we spend online. I ran into this woman, I wish I knew her name. She was a photographer at some event, and she's like, it's just like refined sugar. You're high on it, and then you crash. I was like, that's a great analogy. But I think it's because the time spent on the screen, a lot of it is stressful. It's FOMO. It's time lost. And, I do this practice now. In the book, in addition to kind of talking about all the ins and outs of doing a tech Shabbat, I also talk about little things throughout the other 6 days. And when Trump got elected, I was so stressed out, like everyone, and I was waking up to the New York Times app on my smartphone. And that's what I was reading when I was drinking my coffee. And my amygdala, I'm just stressed out of my mind every morning.
That's how you were starting your day.
No, starting my day, and he's controlling the way I feel, or not he.
Yeah.
I am allowing the news cycle, which is driven to be fearful, to frame my day. And I'm a big journal writer, and I normally do all my journaling on Tech Shabbat. So I thought, you know what? I got this thing called a 5-minute journal, and it's made for people that don't like to journal, that don't feel like they have the time, but although I'm a big journaler. But the concept is you write 3 things in the morning that you're grateful for, as specific as possible, and 3 things that would make today great. And it's 6 lines total. And I drink my coffee and I do that. And and I don't look at my phone. So I spend my day framing my day. So I'm thinking about what's going to happen that day. And I'm thinking about what I'm grateful for, which has been so much research on how much that makes your mood improve. And it has just changed everything by not letting my inbox or the news headlines start my day. So there's a lot of little practices that speak to what you and your friend were concerned about at the airport that if you don't build in this stuff, there's 1,000 engineers designed to keep you on that screen.
That's right. And by the way, I think you are minimizing how many engineers there are.
Okay.
Let's think about it. Come on. Google has 30,000 employees. There are, as I said before, the best minds of a younger generation are actually, they are working to. And what's interesting is, I know you've done research over the last few years into positive psychology and so on, but all of what we've learned about brain science, what we've learned about dopamine, what we've learned about the reward cycles in the brain and so on, the people when in the late 20th century, when people bemoaned television and advertising and how we'd become a consumer society because we were manipulated, that was nothing compared to what's going on now, because now we have the same motivation, if you will, we advertising and so on, but armed with a much more understanding of how the brain works, and then the technology to tap into it at an unconscious level. I mean, I can remember when subliminal advertising, was that was a scary threat. That was such a scary threat. Well, this is all subliminal advertising. This is all triggering responses at a level that you cannot even detect. Let me tell people, this is Freeform, a world that just might work. I'm Terrence McNally. I'm speaking with Tiffany Shlain, Emmy-nominated filmmaker, founder of the Webby Awards, author of 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week, and you learn more at TiffanyShlain.com. That's Tiffany, just the way it sounds, and then Shlain, Shlain. I wanted to say one other thing about my own situation, which is kind of strange, which is that I have never yet become a heavy user of social media. I use it, but not heavy. I might look at Facebook every 2 or 3 days. Twitter, maybe every couple of days. I also, when I'm out and about with my phone, it doesn't come out. It's for me, it's when I'm sitting at my desk, right? My wife calls me Mr. Moderation because I have little trouble with most of the behaviors and habits that a lot of people have trouble with. The other night, it just happens, whether it's alcohol or sugar or, all these things. It's like, I go, oh, that's enough. She says, you will take out and have 2 spoonfuls of ice cream and 1 cookie and you'll be fine.
We all get your DNA.
That's right. Potato chips, I can eat just 1. Okay. But the other night she was reading Cal Newport's work on deep work.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And she came into my office and she said, I figured out what you don't have control of. I figured out what you're addicted to. It's the computer. So it's this weird hybrid that it's not that if you see it's one way it allows me to keep it secret. When I'm out in society, I'm not bent over looking at my phone. I look, like I'm someone who doesn't have that problem. And yet I will, as I say, I'll sit down to get the directions to something and an hour later, I'll be, because it has that weird feeling, and this is something that you talk about, that I'm getting information which might be useful, which makes me a more sophisticated, gives me a more sophisticated understanding of what's going on in the world, blah, blah, blah. But that's one way of phrasing it. The other way of phrasing it is that I've been sitting there now for 2 hours, and what I've been telling myself at some point was work was actually just procrastination or distraction or that sort of thing. And so besides the Shabbat, which we have now talked about, we're going to do how often, when are we going to do it, for how long? Let me ask you that. If we were going to do our first one, right? Is 24 hours a good?
Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, I'm super excited you're going to do it. And for the book coming out, we are inviting everyone to do it with us for 4 Saturdays in a row. And it's so much more fun to do things with other people, as always. So the book comes out on September 24th, and then Character Day this year is the 27th. And basically, we're inviting people to try, that's a Friday, on that night, to unplug with us, with your family, with your partner, with your friends, and do it for a full day and do it for 4 weeks in a row. And I'm going to check in with people. How did it go? What do you need to adjust? We're going to have check-ins in the middle of the week. And because it's all about building the habit of it. And that's a key part that we're trying to communicate, or that I'm trying to communicate with the book. And so we're going to do it en masse. So I invite you and your wife you can go to characterday.org, and it walks you through how to sign up, and then we'll have all these cool resources and things to do on your text about how to plan it, what to tell your friends, what to tell your family, get a landline,
Yeah.
And then the book really goes a deep dive on all the things that can come up and how to prepare and how to make it the best day. I mean, it's our favorite day of the week. We're not giving up something. It literally is our favorite day because we're doing all the things that you don't really do anymore because you could be on your phone or you do it in a focused way that feels really different. So, the book will have a lot of information for you, and I invite you to do it with just tons of people, millions of people all over the country and world starting on September 27th.
Okay, let me just put that in context too, which is kind of interesting, which is that the week prior to that, September 20th, is when Greta Thunberg and the global climate change movement and 350.org are calling for a general strike. That's the 20th of September. And then they say also the 27th for people who couldn't do it on the 20th or who, something else is different, also on the 27th. So those are those 2 days of that general action on climate change. And then comes the night and one can slide right into. So what it also means is that your character day is sort of the end of this week of the climate change general strike.
I love that.
So that
I'm so glad you told me that. I didn't know that day
so
was
now you
happening
can,
then. But it's beautiful because, one of the things that's really great to do on a tech Shabbat is what are things you want to think about or focus on? There's so many ways we don't have time or the space to really go into it. And having this space to think about the environment. I mean, that we are always out in nature on Tech Shabbat or in the garden or swimming or it's such a day filled with nature which doesn't involve screens, which is so great. Take a walk without your phone. That feels miraculous. No one can get to you. But I like kind of merging these thinking. So you're right. You made that beautiful point is we think of tech as separate from ourselves and we think of nature as separate from ourselves, and they're not. It's all one thing. And we should feel the agency that we can do something about it with our tech use, with the way we're treating the environment. We are incredible human beings if we live up to our potential and take the time and thinking about what we need to do instead of reacting every second. So I love that that's around the same
So I'm just
time.
saying this all fits together very, very well. So again, if people want to join you in this kind of beginning their practice as you're renewing yours, characterday.org.
Yeah, and it's the fall is always. I mean, if you have kids, you're in the back to school, which always is like a fresh start, and I'm Jewish, so it's like high holidays. What do you want to do differently this coming year? And I think the fall is a wonderful time to kind of rethink. What are the things you're doing that feel good, and what do you want to change? And certainly, building in a practice that makes you feel better is a good way to start with this Tech Shabbat. And again, it's so simple to do. And I think there's a lot of fear, like, oh my gosh, how are people going to get in touch with me? It's such a liberating feeling when you realize that you don't need permission to tell everyone in your life, I'm going to take 24 hours completely off just to recharge. I'm going to feel better. You tell your boss, I'm going to be so much better this coming week. I need to not be available for one day this weekend. And these are all kind of things I go into detail in the book on how to bring this for real into your life.
And I mean, one thing that as I was preparing for this that just kept coming up for me was how new this phenomenon is. I mean, I've heard it a couple of times, but that we would go, well, how can I do that? How can I be off screens?
I know.
Remember the first 30 or 40, or depending how old you are, 50 years of your life, depending.
You survived. People, it's so funny when parents will say, well, I have 2 kids in soccer. I mean, what do I do? And I'm like, you know what you do? Friday afternoon, you print out the schedule. And you tell the team you're going to be there, or if you have lots of plans on Saturday. But I really try to not make a lot of plans on Saturday if I can,
right?
Because it's not about, Friday night is have people over for dinner. It's a beautiful ritual to do that around the table, eye contact. But then, if you do have plans on Saturday, although it's nice to just be more quiet that day, just make a plan and then just do it. You're not you'll stick to your plan more than if you have the phone on late. I'm all these texts. I'm parking. Who cares? Just show up. So
Right.
people don't need a blow-by-blow on your every
Right,
thought and moment.
and if you're one of those people that has become reliant on Waze or Siri or whoever to get you where you're going and, avoid every accident, you're going to have to maybe leave 5 minutes earlier, if you don't have to, just like you used
We
to.
all existed. We all existed without the smartphone. It's actually kind of fun. I mean, we love that for our kids. We'll have a question and we're like, I guess we're just going to have to wonder. We can't look it up. And then we walk into our library. Which book is going to be able to answer this question? And it's so fun. It's like, this is how you do it. This is how we used to do it.
Yeah.
And it's good to remember how to do that, too.
Right. And then one thing that you share, which I think is comforting probably to people, is that come Saturday morning, not Saturday morning, Sunday morning. Come Saturday night. Yeah, right. Since you do it as the old Jewish Shabbat, which is sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. So Saturday night, you're excited.
We're psyched to go back online. I mean, it has this dual effect every week, where every week I'm excited to go out. I rush towards it. I'm so excited to just not be available to the whole world. And then Saturday night, I'm excited to reconnect and see what's happened and write to a friend. And so you reappreciate this amazing tool called the internet and this amazing device that can do anything. So it has a dual effect, and I think they're both very important for us to kind of figure out this moment we're in, which is, when is it good? When is it not? When is it good to do it on screen? When is it better to do it in person?
Mm-hmm.
When is it better to have that screen off?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what it does is, although, as we said, there are people working as hard as they can to make it so you don't do that, to make it so that the inevitability of the automaticity of it is what there is. Like, you are a fish in water, and what it is all this is you can still take a step back. You can still take a breath. You can still take control of these things. Let me ask you a big question, and we'll see. We've got about 10 minutes left. We'll see whether this takes us through the end or not. Tiffany Shlain, you're standing in the future, 10 or 15 or 25 years from now. So we're talking, say it's 2020, so 2040, 2045. You're looking back over the past 25 years. Did humanity turn things around in terms of authoritarianism, in terms of climate change, in terms of the threat of nuclear war, in terms of exploitation and inequality? And if they did, how did we do it? So it's not what do we do tomorrow to get us on that path. It's if we did it, how did it happen? What's that story?
I mean, I really think part of that story, it's not the whole story, but part of that story is having the space to think about how to turn this around. And that, to me, is this very simple thing of taking a day where you have the space to think and reflect, because we're living in such a reactive time. I mean, well, to first answer your question, I love history. My father loved history. And if you look back 100 years, which is a good swath of time to look at, things have greatly improved for women's rights, racial, although it's definitely not there in this country, but it's further than it was 100 years ago. It's improved in 100 years. If you looked at all the big issues that we care about, it has improved. Now, is progress always like 2 steps forward, 1 step back? I would think we're in that 1 step back. Mm-hmm. But my husband and I like to call ourselves optimists, which is an optimist with a healthy dose of skepticism. But if you look at history and if you believe in humanity and in humans that we are progressing, which I do believe, I do think we are going to go in a good direction. I always think there's going to be forces that are going to try to take it in a different way. And you only have to look at history to see that. But you have to believe that we can work our way out of this. I don't know how you would get up in the morning if you didn't.
Right.
And so what I'm proposing here is a really simple step that you can do personally that can give you the space to do the bigger picture thinking, to make bigger changes, because we need to make a lot of changes right now, and how are we going to get there? And I don't believe we're going to figure that out when we are pinged and notified and buzzed every second and like a gnat. That's the way I feel people are acting like, or ostriches. That's the other thing, like heads in the sand. So I guess and I have to say, it's not like I've got this all figured out. I mean, there's times when I'm traveling, I'm on that phone too much, I'm like, ugh, but I have that interior monologue of like, Tiffany, turn it off. Or you get 2 more days and you're going to turn it completely off and reset. Mm-hmm. And just having that has been amazing. So it's not like, oh, I've achieved digital perfection, but I know that this practice for myself, my husband, our 2 daughters, and one who's a teenager now, there are huge benefits that we all feel and talk about all the time.
So Tiffany Shlain, standing, as I said, 15 to 20 years out, looks back and said, that kooky thing that my family started doing, it caught on. And people,
I would love that.
People started doing it. And once they started finding that they could get along without it, then they began to get more control over it. And they gave themselves, I think one thing that what you find is going from, because I referred to it a few times, was that, 10 years ago or so, the problem looked different because we didn't have the 24/7.
Well, but one thing you said, so the kooky thing, it's not so kooky because it's based on this Jewish tradition that's over 3,000 years old. And when you read some of the writing about the need for Shabbat, like 60 years ago, by Abraham Heschel, you are like, is he writing about today? It's as if he's writing about today.
Yeah.
So I am really just updating a very old idea, and I'm updating it for those who are not religious or who are not Jewish. I want Shabbat to be like yoga and meditation, which are 2 things I do to bring balance and peace back into my life, but I don't subscribe to those faiths. Mm-hmm. And I want Shabbat, the concept of a tech Shabbat, to be something like, oh yeah, I need this. It's going to make my life better. And there's great wisdom here I can learn from about being present and gratitude and focusing on things that matter. So I'm looking to the wisdom of this very old practice that was really about one day every week, it's important to do things differently. Mm-hmm. And even if you look at the labor movement,
yes.
They fought bloody battles on the streets of Chicago for a weekend.
Yep.
And now we're just, there's one study that like 63% of people feel like they need to be available to their boss on the weekend. And it's not healthy. It's just not healthy to be this available to everything and everyone at every moment. So what I'm really trying to bring forth is a very old practice in an updated way that I think can really help the people in the situation we're in. And you're right, it's only been 10 years of it, but wow, look at what's happened in 10 years.
Yeah, by the way, when I grew up, and I grew up in Florida, when I grew up, stores were not open on Sunday.
Right.
It wasn't just that you didn't get the mail on Sunday. Remember the mail? There was a concept. But yeah, stores weren't open. Everyone, I went to Catholic church, but the South was quite religious. Everyone went to church. You were very unlikely. Maybe the 7-Eleven would be open, but nothing else. And it was sort of the way it was. And then creeping event by event, change by change, it became to where it was blurred and there was no difference. I often say that civilization is going to die by convenience. And that's what happened was I need to be able to get to a store on Sunday. How this is crazy. And so it's not, you were saying, it's an ancient Jewish tradition, which it is, but the Sabbath was also a tradition in my family, and it was a tradition in America.
America was this writer Judith Shulevitz proposed that the Puritans came to America because they wanted to observe a more pure Sabbath.
Yeah. There you go.
So it was a big part of our country, and then it's almost disappeared from almost every different culture. I mean, everyone has some version of days of rest or time of rest, from the Native Americans, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, but what you'll really find is hardly anyone does it anymore. And so how do you bring these rituals back? I mean, you can call it whatever you want, and if your faith has it and you believe in a faith, I mean, I'm more on the agnostic side of things, however you need to frame it, but we need to bring it back. Because there was great value in that idea that you're not available 24/7. It's not healthy.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the big idea that we each can do on our own. And as you say, 1, it breaks the cycle. 2, it gives us a chance for deep thinking, for what Cal Newport talks about, deep work. It's a different way of focusing your attention, and it's something that we need, that kind of rich, deep, present thinking and observation now, because clearly bouncing around our attention around the way we are is not working for us. Again, the book.
Exactly right. Yeah.
The book is 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week. The website is TiffanyShlain.com. For this conversation and many other interviews, articles, transcripts of interviews, and to join me in pursuit of a world that just might work, go to TerrenceMcNally.net, TerrenceMcNally.net, or aworldthatjustmightwork.com, to the same website. If you want to receive my weekly email announcement telling you who's going to be on, what we're going to talk about, and usually 8 to 10 articles to kind of flesh out the conversation, you can sign up at my site or email me at temcnally@mac.com. You can also subscribe and listen to the Freeform podcast on iTunes and many other podcast sites. You can find years of podcasts at my site. That's, Michael Lewis, Jeremy Scahill, Naomi Klein, Robert Reich, Van Jones, Connie Rice. You can follow me on Twitter at McNally Terrence. Thanks to George Vasilopoulos at Progressive Voices. Most of all, you, my listeners, please share this podcast widely. And finally, thank you, Tiffany Shlain, and keep up your good work.
Oh, it's so great talking to you again. Really enjoyed all of your insights.